exist. It's just that our experiential consciousness is on one of them, not on the other. Then can we explain déjà vu by saying that if an event happens on both of those probability tracks and there is a kind of breach in the wall between them, that the wall is thin, the boundary is vulnerable, and we can actually see or hear the other probability track? Is it that we've had an experience on one? Let's just think about something really practical. You and me doing the show. Now, let's imagine that on probability track 1, I hadn't been hospitalized, and I'd done a show with you a month ago.
All right.
Now, as it is, we're still together, we're doing the show, I was in hospital, I'm 100% well again, you and I are doing our show and enjoying ourselves and hoping that we're doing our best for our listeners, but it's the same show that we might have done, or a similar show to what we might have done a month ago if I hadn't had the hospital problem. So when we think about the two different lines, one with a problem, one without. So if we had done the Time and Voodoo show a month back on another probability track, that is the one in which I was not in hospital, then maybe if there was a thin place, if it was possible for those tracks to come together, because we're now doing what we would have done, so that the two tracks have a lot of similarities. And maybe the déjà vu experience is a glimpse of the track that might have been if I'd been fit and well and able to broadcast a month back.
And what? What if the possibility exists that these are occurring in other parallel universes or dimensions? Many different scenarios. We're in each one, but it just changes all the time.
Yeah, you see, one of the things, if these worlds of if do coexist with equal reality, let's imagine an extreme example. We have Mr. X, and the poor guy is a homeless alcoholic, and he's sleeping in the street in Universe 1, in the multiverse. Now, in Universe 127, everything has gone right for him. Instead of the series of disasters which led to the homelessness and the alcoholism, and the poor guy, instead of suffering all that, is a multimillionaire. He's good, he's kind, he's friendly, he does a lot for charity. Everybody loves him. He's got a huge circle of friends. He's got a devoted family who think Dad is the best man in the universe, and he couldn't be happier. Now, which is real? What if both of those tracks are real? How does he get from one to the other? How does he switch his experiential consciousness from the horror of track 1 to the infinite pleasure of track 127? Can we move in between them? And if we do sometimes, are we aware that we've done it? If the tracks run into each other and out again, maybe we've changed tracks several times.
Tell me the incredible story of Miss Moberly and Miss Jourdain at Versailles over 100 years ago.
Wow. Well, they were the two British school teachers, and they'd gone on holiday together to France, and they were ladies who enjoyed lovely scenery and beautiful gardens, as well as being fascinated by French culture and French history, and they had gone to visit the gardens at Versailles, which are, associated with Marie Antoinette. And the first thing that gave them a warning that something was different, that something was wrong, was that the scenery close to them, they passed one or two characters there, and they were a little concerned about the way the people were dressed, because 2 or 3 of them were wearing those 3-cornered hats from, 18th century.
I just pictured that, too.
Yeah, and because these are 2 very normal, very respectable, middle-aged school teachers of Victorian or Edwardian times. So They then see a lady who is sitting and sketching, and she doesn't really take any notice of them, but they thought, well, we won't disturb her, she's busy. And they saw someone else leaning out of a window as they went past the Petit Trianon, and then the Grand Trianon. And then they walked on to another area at Versailles, which, listeners who've been there will know the gardens well. And it was called the Hameau. And the Hameau was a kind of, well, I think what we might refer to as a toy farm. It was where Marie Antoinette and her ladies-in-waiting would go when they didn't want to be putting up with all the rules and regulations of the court. They could go there and relax. But it was a sort of ornamental farm where you played rather than did real farming. And the labourers in a nearby farm would actually carefully wash all the cattle before bringing one or two of them over for Marie Antoinette and her ladies to think they were looking after. But it was more of a game than real agriculture. So this is what the Hameau was. And when Moberly and Jourdain saw it, they got this strange feeling that something wasn't real, that something wasn't quite right. The people close to them, who they could see, seemed to be as real as they were. But a little further back, it looked as if the scenery was flat, two-dimensional. You know when you go to a stage show, the English pantomimes that we have at Christmas time, where if you've got the villagers dancing around the stalls on the village green, you've got 3 or 4 real stalls and the actors going round them.
Right.
But behind them, the scenery has got more stalls painted on it, and even actors painted on it, people painted on it, as if the fairground is much bigger than you can show on the stage. It's done on the flat 2D, scenery drops behind. And that's what Moberly and Jourdain said about the things they could see. So what was close to them seemed real, part of their real world. But beyond it, it was as if they'd somehow walked onto a stage or into a setting. And then, a while after, they got safely out again, but a while afterwards, they were in a French art gallery, and there was a picture of the ill-fated Marie Antoinette with 2 of her children. And Moberly and Jourdain looked at each other and said, "That's the woman who was sketching when we went through the gardens at Versailles."
My.
So I think that it's highly possible that they had actually stepped back in time. And I think that one of the factors there was the emotional energy that might have caused the glitch or the problem in time. Marie Antoinette and her courtiers were very, very worried because the French Revolution was just about to burst, and they were not stupid. They knew that something very frightening.
They could see it.
They could see it coming.
Yeah.
And that kind of anxiety we've considered when we've been talking about ghosts. That kind of anxiety creates massive emotional energy, and that emotional energy, just like electricity or magnetism or gravitational energy or heat or light or sound, those energy forms can do things. Remember, we talked earlier about gravity being able to affect time. What if emotional energy can affect time? Just think about those experiences that we have when time stands still, when things go into slow motion. Sometimes I ride a big 1500 twin and she's fast, and sometimes somebody will come out of a gate with a tractor trailer and you weren't expecting anybody because you're on a clear road, and just for that split second you've got to do an hour's thinking in a split second in order to get out of trouble.
And time moves on, Lionel. We'll be right back on Coast to Coast AM.